Hey everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. Welcome back to this YouTube channel on narcissism, narcissistic relationships, healing from these relationships. So, you're both crazy. So this idea of you're both crazy. Have you ever heard that if you've been in a narcissistic relationship? Take a minute, drop your answer to that in the comments. And before we go any further, while you do that, I'm going to take a quick second to let you know that I'm having 2 in-person events for survivors this fall. One is in London, England. It's September 5 and September 6th. And the other one is in North Carolina from November 1st to the 3rd. And I'm also having an event for therapists and coaches in London on September 7th. More information on all of these events can be found in the video description. Okay, so let's go back to this idea. You're both crazy, okay? So again, I have no doubt some of you have heard this phrase, especially if you're in a narcissistic relationship with a partner, but it can even be if it's with a family member or friend. Now, narcissistic relationships are volatile, confusing, upsetting, frustrating, soul-sapping, and they definitely do not bring out the best in the other person in the relationship, the, if you will, not narcissistic person. And many of us can look back at moments in the relationship where we weren't at our best. We can. But it's also more than that. What can look like petty nonsense to people on the outside of your narcissistic relationship may actually be an accumulation of lots of emotional abuse for a long time. So when, let's say you're doing something like holding your ground on something that's really not fair, you may be the ones that are made to look like you're difficult, but people do not recognize that you may have given in 100 times before, and that this time, for a variety of reasons, you're sticking to what matters to you. Maybe it's true north related stuff, but you don't budge. And then you're looked at suspiciously. Now, in some narcissistic relationships, especially in the early days of the relationship, you may react strongly to being gaslighted. Early on, we do. And as time goes on, there may be days that you react strongly to ongoing criticism and passive-aggressive barbs. In one story I recall, it's from a long time ago, I thought of as I was making this video, I was consulting on a couples therapy case. I was seeing the person who was being narcissistically harmed, and I had a meeting with their couples therapist. And every week, I worked with my client to ensure that we were working on clear communication in the session. This is a client who would sometimes have a freeze or a fawn response to the partner and to other people in their life, and that they'd to sort of do work to help them stay calm, that they'd even bring in notes to couples therapy, staying calm in couples therapy, and they went on for months in couples therapy like this. And interestingly, it was almost like a standoff. The narcissistic partner was playing their cards close to their chest and not sharing much, just making some vague complaints and always defending themselves. The client I was working with stayed calm, and interestingly, kind of nothing happened. It was a bit of a stalemate. Then a series of events happened that just touched a nerve with the client who was being narcissistically abused. And in the session, the narcissistic partner said something that set the client that I was working with off, and she got very agitated and angry and spoke her mind. And the thing that will always piss me off, it's a long time since this particular situation happened, but the thing that will always piss me off, and it still kind of pisses me off, is that the couples therapist said, in my consultation with the couples therapist said, well, Ramani, your client finally showed their true colors. Now I recognize they're both crazy. I'm like, no, they're effing not. My client was a test case for how much one person could regulate and hold in all of their emotion so they wouldn't drive this theory that my client was the problem. And then the client sort of slips one time. And I wouldn't even say that the client slipped. I would say that when the partner came after something that mattered to my client, it was a true north thing in this case, that was what the catalyst was. And then that one time that this client broke, that's viewed to be the true nature of the person being narcissistically abused. It was clear that the narcissistic partner was behaving badly, but now they were both viewed as bad. This need to view both people in a narcissistic relationship as the problem is a problem. Don't get me wrong. There are definitely more than a few relationships where both people in a narcissistic relationship are narcissistic and antagonistic, or where the narcissistically abused person is retaliating or behaving in ways that really aren't okay. They may be understandable, but still not okay. I still see the narcissistically abused person's behavior through the context of what is happening in the relationship. But frankly, I don't think both people in the relationship are crazy. However, when you have one person who is regularly getting dismantled and emotionally abused in every which way by a person who is able to put on a hell of a performance in public and play the victim to boot, and they are overregulated, and because the world can't make sense of the narcissistic person, that the world just assumes that both people in this relationship are crazy. No, that's just a way for the world to feel better about the world and make it less scary. Here's the thing, folks, be scared. Narcissism is hiding in plain sight all around you. And do not invalidate the experience of people in these relationships so you can make sense of the world that you want to live in. We don't live in that world. That story that I shared about the person who finally, when they did speak out in couples therapy, was immediately said, look, they both have something wrong with them. That story stuck in my head and only double reinforced actually my drive to want to do this work, because I knew the client well and there was nothing crazy about them. They were, for a variety of reasons and a lifetime of trauma, trying to make the best of a bad situation, right? So the minor children were involved, there's financial issues, and after months of this overregulation in couples therapy, despite having a seething, mean partner, this client was able to keep it together. And then one day they actually just showed a human reaction and were sort of dubbed as crazy. That's not okay. I have no doubt that many of you have been looked at sideways because of your own history in narcissistic relationships, regardless of what it was, intimate relationship, parent, whatever. Some of you might be from narcissistic family systems where you get lumped in with the toxicity of the family system and written off as, oh, that family, they're all nuts. Or in a narcissistic workplace where maybe a very difficult, manipulative, power-hungry person runs the show, and everyone who works there is viewed through that perspective of, oh, everyone who works there is dysfunctional. But where this "you are both crazy" rubric does the most harm is in the world of family court and in the entire divorce industrial complex. Obviously, during a divorce, emotions are running high. A marriage is ending. In some cases, custody issues are on the table. There are huge financial decisions being made. And a narcissistic person who obviously is going to be losing their mind because they're not in control of everything and someone is trying to sort of, ping at their money. So the narcissistic person typically attempts to co-opt all of the legal proceedings. And as you sit there, you are watching what are pretty straightforward laws around community property and custody and, frankly, basic common sense be turned upside down by very well-paid people who simply don't get it. But when these cases get drawn out, even when you aren't showing any volatility, but you are having to fight hard to ensure basic stipulations in a parenting agreement, or push back on a person who is hiding money or engaging in other financial shenanigans, it takes a minute for these divorces. These are not collaborative or amicable divorces because it can't be when a narcissistic person is concerned. So then the judge or the mediator or the custody evaluator or whatever other hangers-on there are making money on this process will say, well, both people are being difficult. They're both behaving badly. This kind of discourse, both people are behaving badly, has actually resulted in sometimes tragic custody agreements, extortionate financial setups, and messy situations that can cause long-standing harm to the children involved. But after all, both parents are nuts, right? And this quick and easy framing can mean that the situation is not examined with a critical or an antagonism-informed eye, nor is it looked at through understanding the larger world of narcissism. If I hear one more person say that everyone in a divorce thinks their ex is a narcissist, actually, no, not everyone does think that. So the hardest part of all is that people in narcissistic relationships are already blaming themselves, saying things like, I was the one dumb enough to get into this. Maybe it's my fault. I could have said this differently. Well, they said that I am too demanding. Maybe I am. Well, like my mom is too demanding, so maybe I'm like my mom. On and on and on. So that means when people from the outside weigh in and say, well, you are both a handful. You're kind of both difficult. You're both crazy. Well, that seems plausible to a person in a narcissistic relationship. And this kind of rhetoric can sometimes push people to keep believing that they are the problem. It can dismantle radical acceptance. And then a person may stop seeing the situation of this narcissistic relationship clearly and go back into it and just keep enduring the harms of the relationship. I can't expect a judge or a lawyer or a family member or an HR person to know from narcissism. That's not their training. I would love if they would, and we can keep trying, but right now, most don't or don't think it's relevant. So that means it's very, very simplistic to go and view all of the gaslighted, messy, unkind, confusing, manipulative dynamics of the narcissistic relationship as just a situation that has two problematic people in it. And that leaves you as survivors often in a far worse position. So I hope this is helpful. And if you did ever hear that sort of, you're both crazy thing, trust me, you're not alone. Thanks again.